Africa has all what it takes, to become a self-reliant a continent and drive its own agenda. But do you think the West would allow this to happen?
It would be a difficult walk to the park. The West would not allow that. Completely don't allow that. But if you look at Africa inwardly, look at, for example, renewable energy. Africa can supply the world 60% energy requirement because of what we have around. But that has not been harnessed. Why? Because the West have turned Africa into a market where they sell their own products. They get natural resources from Africa, take them back to their country, convert that into finished products, and sell them back into Africa. So Africa is at almost near 75 or 95% supporting the Western European economy. And they would not allow any interference in that kind of a system. If that were to happen, then we will see deployment of military persons from those countries to defend the European interests here in Africa. And that would mean something else. They would start by, for example, stiffening us in terms of economic abilities, stiffening us in terms of access to their market and many other things. And as soon as that happens, many of our African leaders do not want to look at outside of, don't want to look at Africa as a market itself. Gaddafi tried that. We saw what happened to him. And many other presidents who came in before him, we saw what happened to them when they tried that kind of an idea. Or you say they can have one currency for African countries. We saw what happened. So majority of African countries are quite aware of that, and they're also afraid that if they were to go against that grain, of course their governments will be toppled. How? By the Western nations, and they're very good at doing that.
And this happened a lot during the Cold Era, the Cold War era. That was between 1980s and early 2000s, where a number of countries, where leadership refused to toe the lines of the West, are toppled. And we have examples. In an era whereby now the global power is now getting evenly spread. You have China now, you have Russia, which is a major military as well as an economic powerhouse, now coming out strongly. And all of these countries, are angling for a piece of the African pie. Who do you think will have an upper hand?
If you look at how China has approached the African market, you will see that they are very gradual. Their loans are very flexible, and they are supporting projects that are tangible. So we are gradually seeing a lot of African countries move towards the Chinese form of funding as compared to the American form of funding. So if this one continues, we'll gradually see a lot of African countries aligning themselves toward China because of how China approaches all the global economy. And that would mean quite a lot to the African nations. They've done a lot of projects. All our SGR projects was done by Chinese government. Our Express was done by Chinese government. So we can see very tangible projects supported by very flexible loans that we can be able to really repay that in a very flexible way. Nevertheless, there are a lot of things that attach to that. We saw what happened in the port of Namibia, Chinese claiming autonomy over that port. So even though this is where we are going, our leaders need to be very calculative. They need to approach this very in a very smart way, because we don't want any African countries ending up giving up its resources to a foreign country because of their inability to repay a loan that funded projects were done in that country. Yes.
Right now, Africa is at the cusp of a major political realignment, and we are seeing it's becoming a playground for major global powers, from the European Union, China, Russia, and of course the US. When you look at all these four global powers, from your observation, who has the best interest for Africa?
It would be difficult to say that, but if you see how China is approaching the African market, we would say Chinese have another way of doing business in Africa. Also, if you look at some summits, for example, Russian African Summit, if you see how Russia is also approaching the African market, it's also different. But because the US is the global power, they have all the muscle, they have the ability to direct all economies around the globe on exactly how they want it to be. So as of now, we see South America the superpower, and the only nation that is able to direct the global economy in the way it suits, in the way it sees suitable for its own interests.
For its own interest.
For its own interest.
And that and those are the power plays that will be at play. Absolutely. Everywhere. Let me get back to this question. I mean, when you look at Kenya, I remember when the former president Uhuru Kenyatta came into power, he was asked, which side are you leaning on? Are you on the west or in the east? And he said, we're not leaning on any side, neither west nor east. today, I mean, that position cannot hold. I mean, if you must pick up side and run with it.
Absolutely.
If you are to be in a position whereby to take that kind of a decision, where would you lie?
I think we've had a long-running global order, and this global order has been run majority by the West. A few things here in by the East. For example, if you go to Nyanza, you see a Russian hospital,
the Russian
funded
hospital
by the Russians, but that never really took a lot of great foot here in the country. So we go by the leader of that nation and where they are aligned. But globally, we would say every country, one way or the other, apart from very few, are aligned to the Russian, the East. Majority of us are aligned to the West, with the global power, US.
But in a situation whereby, you know, there is this narrative that the West is gradually declining, and we have seen things more so happening in Europe. Look, for example, a country like Britain, you know, after the World War and even before, you know, Europe was a major, I mean, Britain, Germany, and Italy, as well as France, you know, are major global powers. They controlled a significant portion of the world economy. And of course, they were major military powers. But we have seen their decline over the last 30 years to a point whereby now they are more exposed because of what is happening in Ukraine. They have almost depleted their military hardware to support Ukraine. And so now they are severely exposed. And so the US also, you know, is also held up in its own war, a trade war with China. And from where you sit and from where you stand, if we were to see another grouping of world powers bringing together Russia and China versus the West, who is likely to carry the day?
We are gradually seeing China growing technologically. China has challenged AI-based AI platforms from the US, the deep sea kind of a platform. Outside of that, we've seen Chinese military develop 6th generation fighting jets, tailors and many other things, right? So we are basically seeing one tenet where China is growing and growing very fast. That's the technological aspect. Militarily, we know the number of persons in China is quite a big number. The number of active personnel in China, if you can compare that,
they have almost 1.5 million
almost that number. If you also look at, for example, the deployment of warship carriers in the sea, you find that Chinese now is closely in terms of numbers and technology.
Actually, they have the highest number of warships in the world.
They do. Their navy is the biggest in the globe.
Yep.
So you are seeing militarily China growing and gradually deploying military assets globally. And that is one area where you can determine whether a nation is becoming a strategic global power or not. And China is gradually moving towards that direction. And lucky for it, it has Russia to support it, has Iran to support it, and other nations that have financial muscles. So if we continue at this pace in the next 20, 30 years, I am sitting from where I'm seated, China will be leading the globe in terms of very many fronts. When you come to trade, it has very favorable trade with Africa, despite the fact that right now, US has 245% tariff on Chinese goods, and that is very high. Nevertheless, you see the Chinese president going globally to realign China in terms of trade, to include the long time for India. They are also aligning gradually with China. And we can see that, yes, China is gradually making inroads globally, and that will be able to torpedo it or propel it to the next level, where China can be able now to dictate terms in the global arena.
You know, as we wind up this conversation, I also want to hear this, and thank God you brought in the issue of tariffs. Trump has imposed a 245% tariff on Chinese imports. When you look at the US-China trade, for every 5 products that are traded by the two countries, 4 are sold to Americans, 1 is sold to the Chinese. Right. And so the trade is heavily skewed towards China, and the picture is replicated all over the world.
Yes.
The Chinese economy has a $1 trillion a trade surplus with the rest of the world, which is significant. I mean, you can't rule that out.
Yes.
And so a lot of people are saying that somehow Trump is shooting himself in the foot, and he's somehow weakening the American purchasing power. And of course, the American place in the global society as a voice of reason.
I think the president of US needs to be very smart on this. Very smart, because we're seeing a very dark future. We know he has flip-flopped on this matter. Sometimes he's strong on it, sometimes he's not on it. He's giving countries sometimes to realign 90 days or things like that. From where I'm seated, when I listen to him, when I look at what is happening globally, I think Trump is projected towards having all nations in the world renegotiate their trades, their trade prospects or their trade alignment with the US. And that could trigger quite a number of things. But if the trend goes on the way it is going on right now, we even see South Africa slapping heavy tariffs. Even our own country, Kenya, we slapped a 50% tariff on soybean, if I remember quite well, to the US, all right? And the American Trade Secretary has said, guys, if you do not retaliate, something will be favorable to you. So if you look at this war, you can't actually tell where we are going. Is the US winning, is the US not winning? China, at the same time, has not bent. It also slapping the same amount of tariff that has been slapped on it. And going out there to find new trades and sign up new pacts. They've signed that to Vietnam, signed that other nations that the president of China, Xi Jinping, was there just the other day. So from where I am seated and from the statements I'm hearing from world business leaders, we are not, if this one persists on, we could not go into recession. It could be something much bigger.
Economic recession.
Completely. Not just recession. Something much bigger. So we need to have our economics mind, approach this very clearly, and you have to be able to really tell where we are going. If we do not tell that, the global economy could be hit so pretty hard.
Your final words. I want to hear this from you. For the grandmother who is watching this show, for the grandfather who is watching this show, for the woman trading their wares in Marigiti Market, why is this important for them?
It is important for them to know because the world is so intertwined in terms of trade, in terms of how we conduct everything. Everything is connected to everything. So one thing happening in another part of the world has a ripple effect on this part of the world. So we need to tighten our belts. We need to do our trade very carefully. We need to approach our business quite quietly, and we need to make the right decisions across the board. Right? For our political leaders, this is the time for us to really look at ourselves and look at our capabilities in terms of trade, in terms of technology, and advance ourselves as a nation going out there to look for market for its own products.
Very good. Yeah. Chris, thank you very much indeed for swinging by and, of course, sharing with us those critical insights. I must say that you're well updated on global issues.
Thank you so much.
And your time is highly appreciated.
I appreciate you.
Asante sana.
Asante Bwana.
Well, we've been talking to Chris Atieno. He's a geopolitical analyst joining us here on BizCheck, where we've been discussing some very critical issues. I mean, this is not your of-the-meal kind of conversation. These are deep conversations here, trying to have a look at the issues that are shaping the world order and why it matters to you, regardless of where you are. Because the issues happening elsewhere are going to affect you because we're living in an intertwined world. Those are the issues we've been discussing here. This is what I call a plethora of issues. My name is O'Brien Kimani. You're watching BizCheck. We're down with the first hour. The second hour is coming up next. And of course, we're looking at the architects as well as the quantity surveyors and how the industry is performing and of course the issues affecting this. This is BizCheck. We are back after the break.
We are joined by pastors' wives who are going to share their stories.
Here I am, 20 years down the line, a pastor's wife.
Along the way, he became a pastor. But when we began together, he was not a pastor.
In the year we were dating, Marvin became a pastor.
There's a big misconception that a pastor's wife should have wigs.
I had so much pressure on how do you dress up, how do you... and it was very depressing.
I fell into the trap of trying to fit into people's expectations.
Sometimes we think we are very ready for it, but actually we are not ready.
You cannot do marriage alone. You have to have people who you're looking up to.
You have to adjust as the time goes by.
Yes.
When things are thick, you also look for help.
Father, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call his name Jesus.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has chosen me to bring good news to the poor.
Not my will, however yours.
I understand that many have already hailed him as king.
Is it with a kiss that you betray the son of man?
Then take this cup from me. Not my will, however yours. Yours be done.
Are you the king of the Jews?
Welcome back. You're watching Biz Check live from our national headquarters here in Broadcasting House. I mean, just about 30 minutes ago, we saw President William Ruto swearing in 14 principal secretaries as well as 2 cabinet secretaries. And of course, we have had a very interesting conversations here on how the geopolitical world is shaping up. Time now to head to the city of Marrakesh in Morocco. This is where the global innovation and technology and innovation exhibition is taking place. Our reporter Betty Kiptum is there. She's following up on the conversation there. She's now joining us so that she can give us a breakdown of what's happening there and who is saying what. Betty Kiptum, if you can hear me, just take it up.
Thank you for watching KBC Channel 1. We are coming to you live from Marrakesh in Morocco. And this is GTEx Africa 2025. It is underway, the 3rd and last day of the event. The tech exhibition of the continent is underway right now. And we want to talk to Harry Hare, who is the director and co-founder of CIO Africa, which has its operations in Kenya. And he'll be telling us just how he finds this particular event and what topics are ticking his mind. Thank you very much, Harry, for speaking with us.
Thank you for showing up and being part of the event.
Karibu sana. Just tell us what kind of topics you're looking at at GTEx Africa and what has caught your interest so far.
I think the big topics are AI. That's like the biggest topic. Everybody is talking about AI, but there's also a lot of security conversations and data conversations. I think those are the 3 areas that have attracted me. I was participating in a panel where we're talking about OT, which is operational technology security, which is a completely different type of security, but very critical, especially now that a lot of organizations are now modernizing their businesses. So yeah, those are the interesting topics that have come through.
We spoke with the ambassador from Kenya to Morocco, and we were informed that Kenya is lobbying to have AI everything held in Nairobi. Just what would the presence of such big events, tech events, do for the tech ecosystem in Kenya?
They build the sector. So that is number one. Because you can imagine having all these people in Nairobi. Number one, you start having very deep conversations about the technology, especially if it's AI. Then you have deep conversations about AI in the country, but also attract people who are looking to build stuff in Kenya, people who are looking to invest in Kenya around AI. And then if you have 40,000 people coming to Kenya, look at that the spend of people who are going to, the people who are there, how much money are they going to spend in Kenya? So it's also like a tourist attraction, So it's these big events have multiple benefits. Other than just getting the sector together, they bring the country to the focus point, so it becomes the focus point of the continent or the globe, however big that event is. So there are many benefits of hosting such big events. Yeah.
Africa's regional markets are very fragmented, and for startups to scale into those markets, they need a lot of funding and expertise as well. What is your thought in terms of collaboration between different regions, different countries, to both attract investment and enable the scaling of these innovations?
So the fragmentation, I look at the fragmentation as a just bad strategy. Because you see when you can't really force private sector companies to collaborate until they see value. Yeah. So if I'm building a company, like now we're in several countries. Yeah. But this is because we see potential in the different countries that we are in. So private sector companies and startups are private sector companies. I think they need to think through their growth plan. So if you want to be a Pan-African company, then you need to build your base as a Pan-African company. And then you can create either direct links into the different companies or now partner with organizations that are doing similar things with you in the other country, or collaborate with them, or build joint ventures. So there are many ways in which you can skin that cat. But it's not really. Sometimes I think we look at capital and funding as inhibits to growth. Sometimes it's our own skill sets and our ability to actually connect the dots that become a problem. So I would want to encourage people, if you're building a company and you want it to be a Pan-African company, build it from the word go. Know that this is our start, but we want to grow to Africa. So how do I grow to Africa? I need to collaborate with companies in other countries. I need to partner or need to build joint ventures. Yeah. How about
the role of governments in now building or enabling this collaboration?
It's big, and that's why sometimes I wish our embassies across Africa or across the world were actually business centers. Right now I feel like the embassies are it's diplomacy, it's visa, it's government to government kind of conversations. But I think those embassies need to be like business centers where they promote Kenyan startups, they promote Kenyan businesses in the countries that they're in. They enable, they connect Kenyan businesses with different potential partners in those countries, sell Kenyan products in those countries. I know they have trade attaches, but I think the globe has changed. Yeah, it's no longer about just diplomacy for what it is. It's about trade. So I think those embassies need to be, and I hope this gets to the people, but those embassies need to be transformed into becoming embassies that support businesses to grow into these regions.
Thank you. Very important pointers. I think as we close, I'd like to hear your closing remarks, how the future looks for the Kenyan tech ecosystem.
It looks bright. I think Kenya, we are well positioned. We have the skills. We speak good English. I think as much as people don't see it, I think we have a really, really good, we're in a good position to be able to grow and scale in our technology space. And our private sector has really played a key role. Kenyans are resilient. And it's that resilience that has grown to some of the big, if you look at some of the startups that are showcasing here, you can see the growth, you can see how these guys, in the next 2 years, they're becoming big companies. So I think the future is bright.
The future is bright indeed. Thank you very much for speaking with us. Asante, I have been speaking with Harry. He is the director and co-founder at CIO Africa, talking about just the tech conversations that are happening. And of course, as he says, the future for the Kenyan tech ecosystem is bright, and there is a lot of room to scale those innovations. Well, we throw it back to you in studio. My name is Betty Kiptum from Marrakesh in Morocco. Over to you.
Betty Kiptum there, coming to us from the city of Marrakesh in Morocco. whereby IT exhibitors are meeting to discuss the present and the future of IT in Africa. Well, we'll keep on engaging with her just to get a feel of where we are going. I mean, we have heard from President William Ruto when he was swearing in 14 principal secretaries and 2 cabinet secretaries. Time now to hear from 2 other presidents. And I am joined by the president of the Architectural Association of Kenya. This is AAK, and I'm talking about architect George Ndege. He's in studio with us. Thank you very much indeed, George, for finding time to be with us this morning.
Thank you, Brian.
Of course, next to George, we have quantity surveyor Mutinda Mutuku. He's the president of Institute of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya. He's also joining us this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I am not a president, but I am O'Brien Kimani, and I am the host for this show this morning. Well, let's get straight to the issues. I want first of all to hear from QS. Give us an idea or a feel of the industry of quantity surveyors. How is it now?
The industry is doing well, or rather the sector. I was here a couple of months ago. We gave the numbers of our quantity surveyors. The universities continue to churn out more graduates into the profession. Yes, and there's an apparent boom. There's a lot of construction happening in this town and others, but that's, I guess we'll get into that at some point. But we're still struggling with the challenges of underemployment.
Underemployment?
Yes, and lack of employment.
And you're talking about an industry with about 1,200 quantity surveyors?
Yes, the registered ones, the certified ones. Of course, with other thousands of young graduates who are yet working their way into registration and certification. But nevertheless, Kenyans who are qualified and who are looking to make a living.
Why would we be having such a small number of experts in that industry? And we talk about unemployment in a country where the real estate industry or the construction industry is growing at a rate of 5%.
I think it's our practices, because if you drive around some of the areas, for instance, in this town, in Kimani, in Kilaleshwa, in Lavington, there is a lot going on. But if you look keenly at the boards, where the site boards are displayed, you will not see our professionals. Yeah? We just allowed some practices to prevail that, in a sense, we shoot ourselves on our feet, because we have young people, young Kenyans, who want to make a living. Out of the 1,300 that you mentioned, quite a big number is in government, in other government, main government, central government. A number is in county governments. And then a few are in government agencies, parastatals and what have you. And then there's now a smaller section that can be qualified to or named as employers, because they're in private practice. But there's only so many that they can take in, given the quantity of work that they have. Yes.
You've talked about quantity surveyors that are employed by the government, both at the national and the county level. Who is the majority employer? Is it the private sector or the public sector?
It is the private sector.
The private sector.
Yes.
So the majority of these 1,000 plus quantity surveyors are in the private practice?
Yes, they are.
And then you have the others being absorbed by the national and county government?
Yes.
I'll come back to you and we find out where the challenge is. Let's now hear this from the president of AAK, Ndege. Architect, give us a feel of how the industry of architects is performing now.
Thank you, Brian. And just as a matter of introduction, it's important for me to mention that AAK is a professional body for 8 professions. It's an umbrella body, really. And I would also like to speak on behalf of generally my 8 professions, including 4 which are regulated and 4 who are not regulated. In some quarters they are called emerging, but they are not necessarily emerging, they're just not regulated or recognized by law. So generally, as you mentioned and as QS mentioned, that the sector is booming. There is a lot of construction. It's not just about the growth, but the amount of activity that we can see visually is a lot. And the figures of how people are engaged does not relate. And it's a skewed situation because majority of developers, majority of investors in the industry are doing things unprofessionally. They are not following regulations. And as a part of what is considered, unfortunately, cost savings, which is not the real situation, is avoiding professional advice. So I would like to use this analogy. Just imagine a situation where majority of Kenyans, up to 80% of Kenyans, preferred to go to medicine men and witch doctors for Medicare as opposed to hospitals. That is the reality of our construction sector. And it is booming, that is no doubt. The only difference is how and under which condition is it growing. I think that's the question that we need to address and indeed find a way in which we can turn things around. Yeah.
How many architects do we have who are registered by the boards of architects and quantity surveyors, BORACs?
So the people who are currently registered or working under the name of architects are around that 2,000 number. But of course there is several others who are budding, both in school and graduates, and some who are not registered, possibly doing their own things. And then there are quite a number who are working with architects in terms of as assistant architects, maybe people who have gone through a diploma course. They can do up to some point of what an architect can do, but they're limited because they're not able to register with our board and they're not able to use the name architect, but they're still there working in the industry either as assistant to the architects or perhaps doing things on their own somewhere. Yeah.
So you are talking about an industry where you have about 4,000 registered engineers in Kenya by the Engineers Board of Kenya. You have about 1,200 registered QSs by the BORACs and 2,000 architects registered by the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors, that is BORACs. And so you're talking about 7,000 plus professionals in this industry. In a population of almost 60 million people, is this a good number?
Actually, I'll say there's a few more. We have landscape architects as well, who are currently self-regulated through AAK because they are not recognized by government in terms of regulation, but we have them on board and we have our own examination. We also have interior designers who are quite a number. We also have environmental design consultants, town planners. So there's a number. If you keep adding that number, there's quite a bit there.
So it's likely to get to about 10,000.
We can get maybe to more than that, maybe double that if you consider the other 8 professions, or construction project managers as well. Still, the question is that you have asked me is whether that enough. I think you can only look at it from the perspective of the amount of work that is there. Building cities, the way we are doing in Kenya, requires a lot of professional input and a lot of future planning. Because when cities are coming up, when people are building the way they are building, it's very difficult for you to picture how the future will look like. And that's where professionals come in. Architects will visualize, town planners and landscape architects will visualize how the next neighborhood will look like. You will have the cost of getting their budgeting being put together by quantity surveyors. And then eventually by the time it gets to the builders, you already have a visual and we are able to simulate how our future cities will look like. Now, if you don't have sufficient, because those steps take time from inception all the way to budgeting, to simulation, visualizations, and then implementation. And during the implementation stage, you also have regular inspections and follow through and different changes to suit the exact conditions. Now, is that happening? No, it's not. Why is that? Mostly you don't have capacity because if you have one set of a consortia of professionals handling a project, you require them to start, and it can take up to a year or two before you actually go to the site. Now, if you don't have people, if you don't have enough people handling all these projects, like Nairobi alone, I think receives about 300 applications monthly. This, if you look at the number of projects that we are required to take off and go to site, the numbers of the professionals do not relate. Now, the worst thing about all this is that even the few professionals who are engaged are not doing the work. So the majority of the work that's actually going on is outside the profession. So I would say, one, we need the current professionals engaged. QS has said there's no work. That's the irony. Even the few who are there are not being engaged. So first, we engage the ones who are there. And then second, we fast track the process of training more so that we can catch up with this urbanization agenda.
I want to hear this from QS Motinda. He's talking about having about 300, project being approved within the city of Nairobi, Nairobi County. And of course, we know Nairobi County, because of its central location and also hosting the capital city of Kenya, it's one of the biggest, urban centers in Kenya, followed by Kiambu, Nakuru, Kajiado, and all the other counties. And so then you'd have so many approvals being given, but you are talking about a situation whereby you go to the site and on the signpost, you don't see the services of a quantity surveyor. You don't see who is the architect. And even sometimes when they may be there, but they are on the ground, they are not there. And so who allowed this situation to prevail?
These two professions, and we are talking about this too, we can't talk about engineers who are regulated elsewhere, are regulated. We have a board, as you mentioned, the barracks. So the barracks is the one that regulates these professions. And why we have so many, we have that number of approvals, and yet underemployment or lack of it, is because we have allowed certain practices to take root. In those sites, these people, a lot of them will come from designs from elsewhere, and come in and plant them onto our cities, into our streets. And you've seen the hue and cry by neighborhood associations, where buildings are going to whatever floor with total disregard of the services, the roads, the sewer, the water supply, So we have allowed that. There's that, and then there is also the practice by quacks. People who are not regulated, people who are not architects, and they are not quantity surveyors. So it's a mix of all those things. So in an apparent boom, in an apparent situation where there's a lot of work, a lot of projects, then you find that kind of situation where there's either underemployment or there's lack of employment altogether, and people are around on the streets looking for work because of those practices. And these are people, if I may, these are people who take a lot of resources, say from government and from their parents, to train. For instance, if I can speak for the architects, they'll do 6 years in the university, and then they need another 2 to 3 years to work under tutelage under someone, and then sit their professional exams. So talking about 9 years. You look for a QS who does 4 years, and then another 3 years, 7 years.
When you look at the board of registration of architects and quantity surveyors, it has been here for decades. You're talking about how many years now?
91. About 90 years, I would say.
Yes. And so it is proper to say that it is older than all the quacks in this country. It is older than many regulations. So how did it allow that situation to prevail, whereby you have buildings that do not have the services of a quantity surveyor and the services of an architect, which is a legal requirement?
It is what it is. I don't want to call it abdication, abdicating the duty.
No, just call it what it is.
But it is what it is, because if I talk for the professionals in terms of us playing our role and mandate, I'll just run you through quickly, is that we start off at high schools. Because a lot of people who stumbled into these professions did not know what to study at the final year of the high school, what course to take. So we start off there. Yeah? For instance, at IQSK, we have a whole calendar of events. And one of the activities that we have is career fairs. And we go to these high schools. We've just done, I think we did Lenana earlier in the year, and Sunshine a few months ago. And we talk to these people so that a child is able to shape, is it, and I'm sure the professions come around. Do you want to be a quantity surveyor? Do you want to be an architect? Do you want to be a doctor? They can realize maybe these two professions, quantity surveying is not mine, so I'll move somewhere. So we shape them. And this takes resources over here. For us to go to these places, it takes resources. And these are resources from the few you've named who are paid up members, law abiding, who renew their subscriptions with us. We do that activity. And then these students transition to the university. The some that choose to take one survey. And we follow them there. We work very closely with student bodies from all over the universities, plus the joint, what they call the joint student council, which is for all the universities. Again, we have programs with them that take resources. All these, we are building a profession. And then they leave university, they are here with us and graduate. Yeah? They are now in the situation I'm telling you of either lack of employment, underemployment. But we are there with them. We still organize forums for them. And then 3 years are over, those who are able to sit the exam become professional members. They are registered. Then Borax kicks in at that point. You see the amount of work that has been done before to create that professional. Yeah.
That's about 9 years.
Yes. Then Borax steps in now when they become professional, take from there. What could happen?
So before you become a professional, Borax is not involved?
It's not there.
It is involved the moment you become now a professional?
Yes.
So it is not involved in the regulation of the training? Is it involved?
In the training, they could, under the Commission of Higher Education and through universities, they could, I think, probably the terms of setting the syllabus, they could be involved there. But what I'm saying is the growth of the human professional from early age, from high school, all the way to the point where he's able to sit exams and get certified. There's a lot that goes into that area. Yeah? Then now becomes a professional. So what we could ask is, can we then allow these people create an environment where we ring fence these professions, that these people who have spent so much time and so much resources are able to get gainfully employed, so that we don't have that porous situation where there is quacks, there is developers who get away with anything in terms of you can raise a whole building from ground up without professionals.
I want to hear this from George, and he's raising, very critical issues here, where the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors, comes in, and from what he's explaining, it's like Borax comes at the tail end of this process. When you look at Borax and the way it is structured right now, do you think it has the muscle? Do you think it has the powers to eliminate quacks and bring order in this industry and ensure that for every building that is coming up, where the services of a quantity surveyor and an architect is needed, they ensure that that need is enforced?
I would say the straight answer to you is no. They have no capacity. They have not attempted to do that. As Kiwe says, the current law sort of gives them powers to regulate people who are in the fold. Those who have already gone through the fire and have become professionals. They are there. I think that's where the board is focusing on. Maybe that's where also their mandate is, that to make sure there is no malpractice. If you are a registered quantity surveyor or a QS, you act in a certain way. But as we know, all these quacks, and by the quacks in this case, it could even be a professional who's not registered, or a professional who dropped out of school but is doing the work, or a professional who's enabling the malpractice, because they stamp them. I did mention about the numbers of projects that are approved, and then you are relating it to the amount that is in the professional involved on site is enabled by some professionals. You'd find someone who's registered, has opened a shop in town, and is stamping drawings from random people, enabled by the level of business that goes on at some county development offices. Now, the board ideally should have powers to regulate the industry at large, not just these professionals that they are.
Why are you saying
registered.
it should have?
Because
it doesn't have.
It doesn't, because the provisions are mostly to deal with how we operate as architects and quantity surveyors. And I'm talking about now Borax, of course. Okay. Whether they have more powers than that, they haven't exercised it, and I don't think they've tried to do that. But that doesn't mean that the only ones who are supposed to do it. We as professional bodies, business membership organizations, AAK, IQSK, IEK, ISK, we have a responsibility as well, because part of what we do is having some sort of what we call self-regulation, where we have a code of conduct, we have membership, we take part in promoting education, we do continuous professional development, and at the same time, we are supposed to regulate what is going on in the industry. Now, of course, for us, since we are voluntary organizations, it's not mandatory for you to be a member of AAK or IQSK. But by law, if you are to practice as an architect or quantity surveyor in Kenya, you must be registered by Borax. So most members actually register by Borax out of duress, they have no choice because you must do it. But,
legally.
Legally. But now, we also have a responsibility to work with Borax. And I think one of the things which maybe the board has not done a very good job at is how they work with professional bodies. A few years ago, AAK and Borax were very close. In fact, even the professional exam, you'd find that AAK is planning and organizing all the students for the preparation for the exam, and the board would just stamp and approve. Over the years, what has happened is that the board has moved very far away from working together with the various bodies. And at the same time, they have not recognized a complementary relationship we can have, which can then work towards stemming malpractice and professional activities in the building sector. But there's also the government, okay? There is the various development control officers in government who are supposed to be also complementing the board, the professional bodies, and the individual professionals to be able to keep quacks out of the space or keep malpractice and other individuals masquerading as professionals out of the space. But quite the opposite is happening, and the individual effort that each of us are trying to do is not going very far.
I'm just on the website of Borax, or the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. And according to their register, you have about 1,284 architects. And then you have about 266 architectural firms. And then you have 882 quantity surveyors. And then 169 quantity surveying firms. The board cannot work in isolation. It has to work with other stakeholders. It must work with professionals. It must work with security agencies, county government as well as the national government. And so, is it proper to say that then the board and the players in it are working in a fragmented manner? Is it proper to say that, QS?
Yes, it's proper to say that, and it is accurate to say that, because, and before I even answer, I just give you an example of today. If you had there was someone masquerading as a lawyer in town, the LSK and its membership would jump hoops to get to that person. Yeah, and that's how you protect a profession. They would not let anyone who is not a lawyer practice law. Yeah. So even as we make, we can try and, justify or make excuses for our board, is in a sense, there is a failure. And the failure, like he says, we all fail, but because the board holds higher ground, it's upon it to bring us all together and be able to work together. So in our fragmentation, we have a sense in which this is a player who is playing at this level, where should play at this level, yeah. Regulation, yeah. And because, and we are here as professional bodies, right? So what they should do is to be able to enable us here, and you can see the member is here, closer to it. Enable us, be able to be eyes and be able to, so we coordinate, we're not fragmented. But plays at this level, but comes down here, again to the level here. And it would seem more like a competition.
Are you trying to say that Borax
it's like a
from an
competition.
ivory tower?
Yes. In a nutshell, that's what I'm saying.
Do you agree with him?
Well, okay. I think the point he's putting across is this, that there is that aspect of Borax. In that ivory tower, they are sort of removing themselves from the realities of what we bring to them in terms of what our members feel. And then at the same time, what he's mentioning is that we have a situation where the board seems to be competing with the professional bodies in some activities, which should not be the case. Where we should be looking at a situation where, if, for example,
the board is supposed to regulate the players.
Yes.
So how do they compete?
So now, this
is a case of the referee and the players.
And the players. So I will tell you.
And each one of them, they have different roles and well spelled out.
It's true.
A referee cannot score.
Absolutely.
A player cannot referee.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. But what happens when you have a situation whereby the board has, for example, a social event, that is a golf tournament, that is the same as what we as professional bodies are holding? What happens is a situation where the board is having the same sponsors on their events as ourselves. So when we go to our sponsor and say, oh, can you come and organize for us? They tell us, oh, we are, but this time around we are doing Borax. Okay? So what we are trying to say is this. The board has a higher hand. It has a bigger responsibility of regulation. And at that point at which it requires us to be able to cascade that down, they can work with us very well. But when we are at a situation whereby we are organizing an event that is the same activity that the board is doing, or doing, what members are expecting us to do, the board is doing. So what happens is that our members are actually choosing to do what is mandatory, and then thinking that they don't need the BMOs. Now, what happens is that...
What are BMOs?
The business membership organizations, like the professional bodies we have. So, for example, the issue of if a member, and I think we were just chatting with the QS earlier, the requirement by law is that a member has to be, for you to be registered as an architect or a quantity surveyor, you have to be a member of a professional body for you to qualify to sit for the professional exam. That is a requirement. At the point at which you get your papers and you're now called an architect or a quantity surveyor, that requirement is lacking. When you're going to renew your annual practice certificate, the board does not require you to be a member or to demonstrate that you're a member of that professional body. Now, how is that supporting ourselves as professional bodies to oversight this industry? We feel like sometimes we are curtailed in a sense that we are not being supported by the board. And you mentioned the issues of, for example, why this board is not able to do that. And I can tell you for sure, it's not they don't have the powers. It's not that they don't have the space, or they don't have. We are not willing to work together. It's just operations, and just how do you run an office? How do you run the day-to-day activities? This industry of ours is big and complex. Even a simple project like a residential house, one residential house requires several professionals, several contractors, main contractor and subcontractors, several fundis to be able to deliver. Now, if you take all that one house as for example, a developer, and I'm using this as an analogy, and give one fundi somewhere at your home and tell them, this is my fundi, what happens? You are actually misusing your finances because you don't know how this one person will react. Now, for lack of better words, I think the board must be able to regulate not just the professional, the individual architect and QS, but it should be able to look at the practice of the various professional bodies and also look for powers, whatever they're looking, or even just exercise the powers that they have to be able to influence the whole sector for purposes of sorting out the issues that we are facing. And the issues are not going to come out right now. We are seeing the signs right now. By the time we're in 2050, where the population of Nairobi, for example, will have doubled, that's when you start seeing the pressure.
I want to hear this from the two of you, because I know, you know, there must be a convergence point where the players and the regulator, you know, converge and have a conversation, what I would call parrhesia, you know, deep conversation on the issues facing the industry and how they can be improved. Do you have such a platform? And when you meet, do you raise these issues? And when you raise them, what happens next?
Oben, when you're on the sidelines as a professional, you may have a fair idea of what goes on in that space. But the appreciation of it is when now you get, like, for instance, now when I got elected as president of KSK, is when you realize we are dealing in a situation where, yes, you're the regulator, I told you about the levels, but there's no consultation. You're there, you engage, and there's no response.
You try to engage the regulator.
Yes,
they don't respond.
There's not even an acknowledgement.
If you go to the offices,
you will sit. You'll have perhaps a cup of tea, but that's it.
You have chai and mandazi, and then you go home.
But you see, that's not where we are in these roles. I am not in this role for myself. For myself, I am quite comfortable in my practice, and I would have stayed there. But I'm here for a purpose. And I've told you, the huge resources, out of the meager resources that we use to grow the profession, to hold activities for the members. Then when the regulator comes down to that space where we source for these resources, and they're also in that space, in essence, what that is doing is chopping the professional body's feet. And then you ask yourself, you are government. You oversight us. Who oversights you? Because there's a total lack of accountability. Then who do you answer to? Are you subject to Auditor General? I mean, what happens with these funds that you raise? Ours we can explain, and we'll explain them to members, ours, every time. We have an AGM that is coming, and we have audited accounts, and we run through them. These are the funds we raise, this is how we use them. So this space we are competing for these resources with you as a government agency. For you is to do what? The resources for you are to do what? So the issue of accountability. We are accountable to you, then who are you accountable to? Because you don't seem to be accountable to us as members.
What is the response to that?
It's not questions we've formally asked, but those are now the questions in our minds.
That you're going to ask?
Yes.
I want to hear this from you, George. You see, you're not new in leadership. You are deputizing the former president of AAK, architect Florence Nyole. And now here you are for the next 2 years. I mean, you're going to be at the helm of AAK. The issues he's raising, do you know them?
They are not new. I mean, we know.
You know them.
The difficult situation we are in is that we know the law, okay? And a lot of what I can say professionals are in such a rat race that our positions are voluntary, okay? We don't get paid to be in these positions. But at the same time, you have to make time, you know, to do your practice and do your business. So it's quite a sacrifice that we make. And we know the challenges firsthand. So the problem comes in sometimes when you start looking for resources and also manpower to be able to push for the change. And a lot of times when we talk about getting into a brick wall, especially when you know clearly what needs to be, and sometimes when what he says is that we put forward situation where we don't focus necessarily on advocacy for the sake of advocacy. We also focus on trying to give solutions. We come up with ideas, we come up with solutions and say, can we do this together? And most of the time you don't get very positive response. And so what happens when that situation arises, you try to find an alternative solution. No, unfortunately, as an architect, what I'm taught to do is to find options, solution for a certain circumstance. But bottom line is that this problem cannot be solved by even one body, even one individual starting there. And that's why I gave the example of a single construction project. That as a takeoff means that all agencies, including the National Construction Authority, the National Building Inspectorate, and the various county approval departments, they have a responsibility to each of them to be able to share data. One, okay, there should be no secret, information. When we are talking about, for example, how does the board raise the resources, or where is it funded by government? We don't know. Okay, it's a government body.
Oh, but that's very easy to know. I mean, you just need to go to the budget allocated to the Ministry of Housing. And then you see which department got what and which organization got what.
Okay, but is it sufficient in their mandate they're supposed to execute? So that kind of situation, the level of information, I would even tell you right now, the board was trying to do, I think, a register of projects to be able to see who's working on what. But then there was a situation where the National Construction Authority blacklisted some consultants because they were having, one consultant was having hundreds of projects which are not practical. But they could not agree, and these are government agencies, on sharing that register and agreeing that we blacklist these people, all of us. Because the board said, it's not your responsibility. But it's not about who's supposed to be doing what. It's about what is the right thing to do, and then can we agree. So for me, I think the challenges are massive. The only difference is that somehow Kenyans have found ways of working around these challenges and be able to move forward and work around the law. And I think that in itself is a problem that if we don't solve as collectively, we will point fingers. And I can tell you right now, I'm trying to avoid pointing fingers to the board, but the reality is that the board has some very hard questions. And I can tell you right now, the current situation that is bubbling is been a lead up to this from a lot of
I've heard that architects and quantity surveyors are complaining about the CPD and the fees charged on these, and you're saying it has gone up by 50%. So when they were going up, what is the established engagement procedures between the board and the professionals? Are there consultations to be done, or what are the regulations around that?
I think that sets us back again, Obian, to the issue of Ivory Tower. Because I'm here, elected to serve, not for pay or for anything. So I'm a leader of a professional body. Where would we, and why would even a member, forget about elected officials, learn this in the way that they learn about it? Is that we're living in a dispensation where if you're making changes that are substantial enough and affect people, you sort of engage them. You talk to them. At the very least, if you don't talk to them, then issue a circular. This new change, and where there has been an issue, and there's a bit of hue and cry, as George is saying, is you get a message, a text message, and in it there's a link for registration for a seminar. And then when you click on the link and you start registering your name, blah blah blah, halfway through, you realize the fee is up.
And there was no prior.
No, the fee just went up. It's just been sort of sneaked in there. So it's what we are saying. This industry is complex, like he says. It needs all of us, to be able to work together. He didn't mention about other regulators who regulate other players, the contractors. Even those, they're not too removed from this thing, ourselves and the board. We need to work together, because for a project, it has both a contractor, a developer, and consultants. If you regulate the consultants, then you must talk to the other regulator who regulates the other player, the contractors and fundis and what have you. And you've seen, that's how they're making efforts. Buildings here marked X, red X is all over. An attempt to try and create order from that perspective, from their perspective. So what are we doing from our perspective, which is the consultant side?
That's the question. I mean, you see, the BORAC is there to serve Kenyans. AK is also there to serve Kenyans. because at the end of the day, you cannot operate in isolation. You need Kenyans because you are working on their project. The board needs AAK because they are regulating their members. And so how should the two or the three entities move together, the public, the professional organization, and the regulator, for the benefit of this nation? George.
So essentially, the government, of course, has a bigger role of oversight. And as they are oversighting, they are looking at a situation whereby what other levels of regulation is provided for such that they complement what the government is trying to do. So the general public itself is more, what I would say, a little bit ignorant when it comes to a lot of information to do with construction and the whole sector. So we have that responsibility to educate the masses, okay? Because as professional bodies, we are not only targeting our members, we are also targeting the public. But then we are using the government regulations laws and bylaws to be able to advise the general public on how to operate. We are sort of in the middle. We are the linkage, okay? And the reason why the government is regulating us is so that we are fair to the public. And now the public needs to know that consultants and professional bodies are their friends, because our job is just to take that legal mumbo jumbo and bring it down and say, if you are required to do a setback of A, B, C, D, this is what it means on your project. Now, so the government in itself should be able to recognize all professional bodies. And I'm talking about all consultants. And then the consultants who are regulated and recognized by government are able to offer what we'd call quality service and get fair remuneration. We have issues of low pay. We also have issues of low commissions. So if a firm does not get fair share of its work, it does not employ, it cannot employ and pay fair payments. So if the government does not create an enabling environment for business to thrive, then it means that consultants are going either to do quackish behaviors, or they're going to be unfair to the general public.
As we wind up this conversation, I want to give each one of you 15 seconds to give us the way forward. Mutinda, QS.
The way forward is communication, is collaboration. Yeah. Regulation is not control; it's engagement, and that's the best way to go.
Very good. Architect.
All I would just say for us, the idea that we need to work as an umbrella organization, especially when it comes to the sector, to be able to achieve the goals, because there's no one project that will be achieved by one individual, and more so the issue of building cities is a community issue. It's a collective responsibility, and in the future when we have our cities not working, you can't point a finger to even the board or any specific person. We will be collectively responsible.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. President, and of course for sharing with us those critical insights on the issues affecting the industry of architects and quantity surveyors. Your time is highly appreciated. Let's keep it engaging, and we hope for the best.
Thank you.
Very good indeed. I mean, I've been talking to the president of the Architectural Association of Kenya, George Dege, and that is architect, and of course QS Mutinda Mutuku, who is the president of Institute of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya, joining us this morning. Now it's afternoon actually, to help us understand the issues bedeviling the industry. And of course we have discussed these among a plethora of issues. O'Brien Kimani is my name. Kurunzi is coming up next with Khalid. Stay right here. Good afternoon.
Nilikupeleka kwa pedicure.
Aje sasa.
Nilikupeleka